Good evening, Graham.
Hello, Charles.
It's Sunday evening. I'll pretend that nothing has happened today, nothing significant,
Dear, oh
nothing
dear, oh dear.
on. Someone didn't turn up. That was me, but someone else didn't turn up. But I won't say who. I won't say which
Leeds
part of
United,
England
the
it took
mighty
place in.
Whites, they're not so mighty Whites.
Anyway, let's move on swiftly
Mm.
to something far less disappointing than that. So, Graham, good evening to you and good evening to Anthony. This is Sunday evening, as I say. And let's start with, well, it looks like a quick interruption.
Oh, yeah, I mentioned Rishi Sunak the other week, the former British Prime Minister,
Yeah, never,
an
never
MP
rushing at
for,
Sunak.
yeah, MP for Richmond in Northallerton, and how I'd met him, but he didn't seem to realise he was going to meet me. And him and his team and his security guards seemed less than chuffed about the local MP meeting the local reporter. And you remember how I said that the only question I was going to ask him of any interest was going to be, why are you still just a local MP? Why aren't you doing something else that would be up to a former prime minister's status? And it
Mm.
turns out that I was simultaneously spot on, but also woefully ignorant, because it turns out
Ah,
that as of last October,
yeah.
he is an advisor not only to Microsoft but also Anthropic, and Anthropic's a new AI
AI.
company based in America, which has developed a new model called Claude Mythos or Mytho. And Grayson Perry's had been in Channel 4 recently, the artist, talking about
Mm.
he's seen the future and he's been to San Francisco and it's all about AI. And he tried to be very positive about it. It was all quite scary. Anyway, Rishi's up to his neck in that, turns out. He isn't just a humble local MP after all. He's advising Microsoft and Anthropic. So I was sort of right, but sort of wrong.
It's all very depressing. Meta, I see, are getting rid of 8,000 people just to replace them with robots. Gosh, how
Yeah,
predictable.
well,
But apparently it's all
Rishi,
going to be hugely
yeah,
beneficial to us all. No one's going to lose jobs. There's going to be a whole lot of new jobs created. And it's not that wealth is going to go to an even smaller proportion of the population, apparently. Ho,
well,
ho, bloody
that
ho.
that's what Grayson was trying to get away from, although it did surface
What's
during
the
his
point of him
two-part
trying to get away
documentary,
from that?
Channel
He should
4.
do an interesting
But
artistic response.
yeah, he bottled it really. He didn't want to look negative or not cool with the kids, so he ended up being overly positive about the prospects. But anyway, Rishi was in Newsnight just last week talking about how
Mm.
jobs for younger people are already being hit by AI. And he also said that companies now are talking about, they're saying that flat is the new up. And by flat, they mean that they can grow the company without actually employing many more employees, therefore turning it into pure profit as they grow. And Rishi was saying that he thinks there should be a way of like making AI actually create new roles. And I thought that's all very well, but you're advising Microsoft, who I'd be surprised if they were in the process of working out how to use AI to create jobs, because as everybody knows, the whole point of companies and business is to make as much money as possible. And why would you create a form of AI which, whilst increasing the size of the company and the amount of revenue, also increase the number of staff by a significant
But isn't
number?
it isn't going to happen? What will be fascinating is when AI puts AI out of work. That will be interesting.
Well, no, there'll be an AI competition. If you think that
Mm.
technology involved with phones and social media and online right now is constantly, the software is constantly being updated. There's always new apps. Well, AI will be the same. There'll be new AI programs, ten a penny, that you have to pay for,
Yeah.
and there'll be people who've got money, or people who are fairly affluent will be able to buy top AI apps which do everything, and everybody else will either not have AI apps at all, or they'll have the budget version which won't be as successful. So I can't see in what level, apart from making technological progress and maybe scientific and medical progress, I can see all that happening and being an improvement. I
Hmm.
can't see how it actually benefits the economy in terms of jobs
Graham,
or equality
as we're,
or fairness of tax revenues.
I mean, as
Because if
we're
you got,
principally
mm,
an arts podcast in many ways, I guess the question is, how does AI benefit the arts? Because Grayson, did he offer any suggestions that that would happen?
not really, he just let the mainly young people in San Francisco talk positively about using AI to do things, as if by some magic, it was going to create jobs as well. But he didn't. He didn't really have any idea as to how it was going to create jobs. No one does. I mean, Rishi's been saying recently that as employee numbers reduce, we're going to have to get rid of national insurance tax altogether because it'll be useless for the government to have it, and it should be replaced by a corporation tax, a new corporate tax. And I thought Rishi Sunak, the ex-Tory Prime Minister who works for Microsoft, is he really suggesting there should be no national insurance and replaced by a corporate tax? And I thought, I don't believe a word he's saying. I think what Rishi's doing is what Clegg did with Cameron.
Yeah.
It's like a version of greenwash. It's
Mm.
designed to make something which is going to have unpleasant consequences seem palatable, and I think that's the game he's involved with. Just like Nick Clegg was Lib Dems in the Tory coalition, it makes bad news seem like it might be good news.
I see he still puts the rich into Richmond, doesn't he?
Well, yeah, he's got enough money to create UK companies, or at least to invest in UK companies to create AI that would help Britain if he wanted to. But he's actually getting money from Americans. So I don't know if
Well,
he's really serious
that's
because
where he first made his money, wasn't it? I mean, he was down in California. That's where he made his money.
well, yeah, him and David Lammy, the Labour cabinet minister, they're
Mm.
both trying to big up the idea of Britain benefiting from AI and the British economy getting involved with AI for British interests. And it's a good idea in paper, but I really don't see, without having any British or European major players in the AI world, how that's going to happen.
Correct. The A1 was far more significant in the history of Britain than Britain's contribution to AI. Discuss.
Well, no, well, yeah, as usual, Britain comes up with a lot of the ideas and the science, but then doesn't have the money or the political will to actually capitalize on it financially.
Well, that's a further depression on top of my initial depression to start this evening with. Let's go for a hat trick of this. The strange success of comic writer Tim Kay, or Key, I should say, watched up
Okay.
Key up close on stage in Leeds. I'm assuming he played the Leeds City Varieties, Graham. Would that be right?
Of course, yes, yes. The old music hall recently renovated, which was first opened in 1865,
Hmm.
and Tim Key is there in his Loganberry tour. And don't ask me what Loganberry means, because he just picks sort of names at random for his tours in general. And he was there, and it wasn't quite stand up, and it wasn't quite anything else. He was there theoretically to push his new book of poems called L.A. Baby. And when I say poems, I mean anybody can string a sentence together can call what they're doing poetry. So it isn't really proper poetry, but it is quite funny. And so he's there to push the book and to talk about himself and how successful and famous he is, or maybe he's not as successful as he thinks he is. And I suddenly thought back to Garth Marenghi, the
Hmm.
fake character who was there at Leeds City
Oh,
Varieties a few
yes.
weeks ago.
Yes.
And his character is quite the same, where both him and Tim Key are talking about themselves the whole time and whether they're really successful, and they really want to be successful, but they also, in a self-deprecating fashion, suggest that they're not really that successful at all. And it was that sort of shtick that he did for the whole show on and off.
Would he have preferred Ballad of Wallace Island not to have been successful following that logic?
Well, he did sort of wittily mention in past a couple of times. He said, how many people are here because of the film. So he made a little reference to the success of The
Hmm.
Ballad of Waltz Island, which he co-wrote with Tom Basden, and which was quite a hit for a tiny budget.
Exactly.
And it was a very interesting show. He's a very watchable man. He walks on stage in a suit with a baseball cap 10 minutes for the start of the show when music is still playing on the PA. And he just wanders around the stage slowly, look at the audience for nearly 10 minutes. Occasionally gets someone eye and just nods sort of like knowledgeably to the person in the
Hmm.
crowd. And this went for 10 minutes, and then the show actually started. And when he started the show, it was all very dry, very droll, very clever. But every now and again, he'd burst into like emotional language and start shouting almost at himself rather than the crowd about how he wasn't as successful as he wanted to be. And then every now and again, he'd surprise you by being really vulgar and using a swear word. And it was like he was trying to manipulate and control the audience the whole time. And I know that stand-ups always do that
Have to
because they
do
have
that.
to, because
Have to do
it's
that.
you
Yes.
versus a lot more people. If you're not in control of the crowd as a stand-up, well, then you're the victim of the
Yep.
crowd. But he was particularly, whereas Garth Marenghi, or the man playing Garth Marenghi, was quite gentle in his persona, in his handling of the crowd. There was something quite almost cruel about Tim Key when he did it.
Mm.
And it's only comedy, so you can't get too annoyed about that. But he was particularly rude to one member of the audience when he was talking about how he was very excited because he takes the mick out himself all the time. He's very excited to be having in a cafe in London, and in walks Greg Wazowski, the former British tennis player, and he was excited about that. So he started chatting to the crowd about that and asked
Mm.
if any remembered Greg Wazowski. So some guy in the balcony stupidly said yes, he did. And so then Tim had a quick chat with him, and the guy got an obvious fact about Greg Wazowski completely wrong. And then Tim was very rude about this member of the audience to the rest of the audience. And when he did it, he did a little sort of like almost a wink to let the crowd know he wasn't actually serious. But it was still quite brutal, I felt. So Tim's a strange character on stage.
So he's not low key, obviously.
He's low key, except he suddenly erupts in anger
Mm.
or with a bit of vulgarity or a swear word. He,
Maybe
he likes to
that helps the control.
unbalance you.
That
Yeah,
helps the
yeah,
control, doesn't it? That you're not
exactly.
sure what
Yeah,
to expect. You don't know what he's going to say.
he suddenly turned up in the balcony in person at one point in the show and started chatting to audience members. He
Mm.
really does like, there's a set almost, it's bizarre because he's just a man with a baseball cap and a suit. There's a
Mm.
slight element of danger
The other
about
man with a
Tim
baseball
Key.
cap and a suit is Donald Trump.
Actually, I didn't get that reference, but Tim is such a clever guy that's not impossible that was in his mind.
Mm.
Possible. Anyway, the weird thing was that I enjoyed the show, although I didn't laugh as much as for the support act. But then again, lots of famous stand-ups are fascinating to watch, but you don't always laugh the whole time. So I
No.
enjoyed the show, but there was a real Tim Key moment at the end of the show because as we
Mm.
filed out of Leeds City Varieties, he had gone downstairs to do book signings of LA Baby.
Oh, yes.
And because we'd come downstairs to get out of the building, we knew there was a huge queue of people winding up the narrow stairs back
Yes.
to the actual auditorium. But when you left the building and you stopped and looked round through the open doors to where he was sitting signing books, you couldn't see the crowd. And it looked like he was sitting on his own. I thought that's a bit of a Tim Key moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Graham, you've been reading books as usual, and this time this is a book by the Guardian's foreign correspondent, Jason Burke,
Actually, he's the international security correspondent. I got it wrong, Charles.
international security correspondent.
Yeah, yeah,
That
yeah,
seems to
yeah.
be quite a niche market.
Well, he's very niche because he's been doing this thing for 30 years. So the new book, which is published by the Bodley Head, which of course is part of Penguin Random House,
Yes.
inevitably. The new book, The Revolutionists, the story of the extremists who hijacked the 1970s, it's 600 pages long.
Phew.
The footnotes are almost as long as the book. And you can tell this guy absolutely knows his subject inside out. He's probably met lots of these people, and
Yes.
he's probably knows guys in the CIA, blah, blah, blah. And you can tell that because the quotes on the book cover from people, you got ex-Tory cabinet minister Rory Stewart
Mhm.
calling the book astonishing. You got Channel 4's international editor Lindsay Hilsum calling it
Mhm.
riveting. You got Fergal Keane, the BBC's best forest correspondent, apart from the fantastic guy who always does Middle East, whose name
Oh,
I've
yes.
forgotten,
I know who you mean. Yeah.
Jeremy Bowen.
Jeremy
Well,
Bowen.
Fergal Keane called it like a great spy thriller, and it is like a great spy thriller. It's very good on detail, very dramatic, very human, and he quite sensibly doesn't judge the extremists who are doing all these hijackings, which almost inevitably led to deaths.
Yeah, of course.
He's got a neutral tone. He says, "I'm not going to call them terrorists because, you know, terrorism's in the eye of the beholder." But I remember the hijackings in the 1970s, which ran on to the 1980s. I remember the names in the news like the Red Army Brigade,
Yeah.
the Baader Meinhof Gang, Angry Brigade, the Weather
Mhm.
Underground in USA.
Mm.
And it lasted there's about 15 years of them kidnapping, hijacking, bumping off people. And it was the difference between it then and now, and this is what the book tries to tell the story of how mainly left wing Marxist influenced freedom fighters in single quotes of the 60s and 70s ended up turning into Islamist, quite dictatorial,
Mm.
authoritarian terrorists of the 1990s and current day. And I remember when in the 70s and 80s, those groups they were enemy number one, but they were quite cool in culture. Like the Clash were always mentioned, the Red Army Brigade, and dressing in their gear.
Yeah.
On the Tear Up Explode's second album, Wilder, 1981, there's a song called Like Leila Kala Said, which and Leila Kala was a member of like the then PLO who was doing the hijackings. So it was different days then when you could do that sort of stuff and not be outside the mainstream entirely. And it wasn't outside the mainstream, it was almost part of the mainstream game in a way that isn't anymore.
Yes, I mean, to think that Teardrop Explodes actually did a song about Leila Kala said, exactly.
Mm.
Trying to think which modern band might be doing such a thing now. Probably not.
No, well, you get Kneecap, etc., and Bob Villain, who are obviously against Israeli attacks on Gaza, etc.
Yeah.
But I don't think Kneecap in real life actually have any affinity with Hamas in
No.
Gaza. And if they met them, I'm not sure how well they'd get on because they're a world apart. I think the difference between then and now is that those extremists in the 60s and 70s weren't a world apart
No.
from mainstream Western politics in the way that today's terrorists are, if you're going to call them terrorists.
You're suggesting that the book is missing the point, though. So, reason for that?
Well, it's a bit like he's a really clever writer, really clever bloke, Jason Burke. It's a really great book, and the details are fantastic. And you pick up little bits like in 1968, the Israelis who never take anything lying down, they responded to pro-Palestinian hijackings and attacks abroad by sending special forces to Beirut in Lebanon, even though Beirut and Lebanon hadn't really been involved.
Yeah.
And they blew up 12 Lebanese civilian airplanes on the airport in Beirut in some sort of strange retaliation against the nascent early version of the PLO's activities. But one of the special forces, a young man who was part of that group who went into Lebanon and blew those planes up, was Benjamin Netanyahu. So you get all these
Oh,
fascinating little details pop up in the course of the book.
yes.
So it's hard to be critical of the book, except for one thing. It doesn't tell the story round the growth of that sort of hijacker, extremist, terrorist, whatever you want to call them. And the backdrop is that politics and culture in the Western world were different in the 60s and 70s than they are now. And he doesn't seem to be getting into that whatsoever in the book. And so, although the book shows the transition into the present era, which have developed after the Shah fell in Iran, and Islamist revolutionaries started to be the big thing in the Middle East rather than left wing influenced terrorists, because
Hmm.
even the PLO were into Che Guevara
Yeah, yeah,
and Marxism. He shows that really well, but there's only a small number of actual Islamist terrorists right now, and there's only a small number of left wing terrorists back then.
yeah,
And the reason they're both important isn't just because they kill people, it's more that they represent something. They represent a lot of people in a real situation. So now Islamist terrorists represent nations who are under threat from someone else,
Hmm.
sometimes Israel. And back then, you had very strong trade unions, you had left wing parties, which actually were left wing as opposed to the middle of the road. So the small number of hijackers in the 60s and 70s had resonance because the mainstream culture was more left wing. than it is now, and he hasn't bothered going into that.
No.
Probably because it was spoiled the plot. You could see a TV series coming out of this book.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, recommended reading or not?
Definitely, it's really well written. It's really fascinating. But the endless I mean, lots of the hijackers got killed. It isn't just that
Mm.
they killed
No,
innocent civilians,
absolutely.
like the terrible Munich Olympics
Yeah.
village disaster where they killed all their
Mm.
Israeli hostages.
Yeah.
They themselves got killed a lot. It was a very dangerous profession or cause to take up.
Yeah. Of course.
And it does get a bit wearisome that everything that happens in the book ends in death. It's just like, oh yeah, new hijacking, new terrorists, new reason. It becomes wearisome, just death after death after death. I
Mm.
would rather hear about the ideas. I would rather hear about what did they think they were doing? What do these people think they were doing by doing what they were doing? And it's more of a narrative than it is a discussion. And I would prefer if the book had been more of a discussion.
Yeah, I can understand that. Um, I mean, it's interesting that we can vividly remember hijackings in the 70s. We
Mm.
can vividly remember the political intrigues that went with that. Um, well, I would suggest more than any other decade, we would remember that.
Well, yeah, because it was on the news a lot, and it almost became expected that there was a chance you'd get hijacked and flown to
Mm,
Cuba
mm,
or, Jordan or somewhere. I mean, but it was all around the world. There was a Japanese Red Army as well, so it wasn't just the PLO. It was, well-educated Western middle class ex-student protesters or
yeah.
even musicians and journalists became terrorists, whereas the Middle East terrorists tend to come from a background where either they themselves had been displaced by the creation of Israel in 1948, or they were the children of people, of families that had been affected when Israel was created. So there was a link there between the two that was they weren't even compatible in some ways. What linked them together was the fact they both were interested in left wing politics and Marxism. And once Middle East groups stopped being interested in Marxism, which happened basically because Thatcher and Reagan killed off the
Yes.
left wing in the West,
Mm,
they looked to religion then as the driving force of their activities, sometimes murderous activities.
mm. Which is always a frightening thought that religion is used in such destructive ways, but
Well, it was in the West. I mean, the
of
Crusades were
course,
pretty damn nasty. That was a Western invention.
absolutely. And you could say the conduct of slavery as well, taking over people and as well as forcing them to do labor, but also imposing religious beliefs on them as well in doing that.
Exactly. Anyway, on a lighter note, as the time is running out,
Yes,
you know that Shed 7 are touring again this November.
they're doing their Shed Summer 10,
Yeah, although it's in November, so it's more like Movember,
November and December.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And of course, they're doing like all the sort of O2 academies across
Yes.
Britain, and including Brixton Academy.
Mm.
And they're playing Leeds O2 Academy twice because the first one sold out pretty damn quickly. So their amazing revival of recent years seems to be continuing.
I still think the question is why on earth are they not playing the arena? Not the arena, playing playing first direct bank arena now. Surely they could fill that now.
Well,
The
I
evidence is
was
give it a
thinking,
go.
why aren't they trying arenas? If David Byrne can do arenas, if Fontaine's DC can do arenas, there's so many acts now that are jumping into arenas.
Mm.
I was quite surprised that they didn't
This
have
is the
a
moment to do it,
gamut
isn't
and
it?
try one.
This is the moment to do it.
Hmm.
I would have thought.
Well, perhaps they don't think they're quite popular enough to fill Leeds Arena, or
Maybe
maybe
they
the
maybe
Leeds
also
Arena.
maybe they also just
Yeah,
like playing the O2 Academy. Maybe they like that environment.
that's true. That's true. And also, although Rick Witter is a very good frontman and a great bloke, as we know, because
Yeah, exactly.
we've known him on off for a long time,
Mm.
he's actually quite modest. He probably thinks that he doesn't really want to do an arena and act
No.
like, Billy Big, what do you
Yeah,
call it,
yeah.
so to speak. Tim
And
Key
they're
would have
also
said
playing,
bollocks,
Graham.
by
They're
the way.
also playing at Peace Hall, Halifax. They're doing the anniversary of Maximum High, so they're going to be playing the album in full there, of course. So that's as we're in the anniversary of the album that produced 5 hit singles, of course, Graham.
Yeah, no, amazing record.
Mm.
For an unfancied band, they've done exceedingly well.
They have indeed.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic Sub production.